Hello and welcome to Cardinal Dash. I'm King Jemison alongside, as always, my guy Daniel Martinez Crams, Berkeley's own. And we're here to discuss a whole lot of Stanford sports because, honestly, the Stanford sports calendar is just getting heated up. We're going to start with the biggest story of the day, and that is, of course, Stanford women's basketball securing the #1 overall seed in their quest to break a 29-year title drought. This might be their best opportunity yet, and it might be one of Tara's best teams ever. But Daniel, still a pretty tough path for the overall #1 seed. What do you think about Stanford's bracket and their route to, of course, they're staying in San Antonio, but their route to that Final Four in San Antonio?
I think the path is so difficult this year because of how wide open the field is. There's no one dominant team, which is why on the day of yesterday, as Selection Monday was coming in, no one was really sure who the top overall seed was. I thought it was Stanford because obviously they're placed in that Alamo region. It was in the top left of the bracket. But it took the media about an hour, and Daily alum Alexa Philippou finally went to the NCAA and asked, and it's like Stanford is actually the top overall seed. But do they really get that much for it? Because there potentially could be an Elite Eight matchup with Louisville and Dana Evans on the horizon. And we talked about this last week because Charlie Cream had Stanford as that #1 overall seed and had them matched up against Louisville. So we talked about what this could potentially look like for Stanford. But even before we get to that point, Stanford has a couple of difficult games coming up. The one against Utah Valley should be one Stanford is able to handle. Utah Valley got in on basically what amounts to a technicality because their conference had voted that the Cal Baptist would get replaced by another team. It's a whole complicated thing. But basically, Stanford should get a nice first-round matchup, get their toes wet, feel good about being in San Antonio. But as soon as that passes, some difficult games are coming up. They have, obviously, Oregon on the other side of the bracket. They have Missouri State, who gave Stanford fits back in 2019. So there's a lot of talented teams in this group, but I really think it's going to come down to Stanford in that Elite Eight matchup with Louisville. And we're talking about Dana Evans, who, if you slow her down, Louisville may actually lose, right? In their losses, she has gone 10 for 22, is good, 5 for 21, not so good, 7 for 21, not so good. If you slow down Dana Evans, you have a chance of slowing down Louisville because she is such a focal point in their offense. And who better to do that than Anna Wilson, who we've been talking about all year. Dana Evans, a 5'6" guard. Anna Wilson's a little bit bigger than that. She can stay with anyone, extremely athletic. She'll go out there so hard. And then obviously it's a tag team with Lexi Hull and Lacey Hull replacing her when Anna Wilson is not in. So that group, if they can shut down Dana Evans, they have a good chance at shutting down any team because Stanford can rely on its defense, and then any one day its offense can get working. A lot of the time it'll be Kiana Williams, but more than often than not, it's someone else filling in. It can be a Haley Jones, Cameron Brink, Lexi Hull. So many talented scorers, no one person you can shut down. That gives Stanford an advantage over teams like Louisville, who need a player like Dana Evans to show up every single game.
Yeah, I don't think Louisville's the best 2 seed. They might be the most dangerous because of Evans. And so it's not the exact matchup you want to see waiting for you in the Elite Eight. But I think any player in any bracket style tournament will tell you you can't focus on anything but the game right in front of you. And so you got to believe that Tara has her players out there prepping for Utah Valley like it's the national championship game against UConn. That being said, I feel extremely confident in Stanford reaching the Elite Eight in this top half of the bracket. I think that the committee did them no favors, but also did not give them the most difficult route through those first 3 tournament games. And also, we've seen that for the most part of the season, Stanford has just been rock solid. I mean, they had 2 losses, but they're on a 14-game win streak. And my point would be that one of those losses was to a non-NCAA tournament team. The other one was to a 3 seed in UCLA, in which they avenged that loss twice. And Stanford has, I guess, 4 total wins against 3 seeds over Arizona and UCLA. And so there's a lot of high-quality wins on Stanford's resume, very few losses, period, and particularly not losses to bad teams. And they're just going to overwhelm you with talent. The question is going to be when they run into a team like Louisville that doesn't have similar talent all the way around, but it's going to be a rare Stanford opponent that might have the best player on the floor. What are the Cardinal going to be able to do? I still have a ton of confidence in them. I think this team is going to at least the championship game, but I do think that that's not an easy draw in your bracket to have Louisville waiting. And that being said, I think that that's still a team Stanford should beat. When you talk about having one of the best defenders in college hoops and Anna Wilson on your team, and particularly that she's a backcourt defender, perimeter defender, and can maybe slow down Evans. That's kind of all you need to do to beat a team like Louisville, and then all of a sudden Stanford finds itself back in the Final Four for the first time since 2017.
And Stanford really does have a path and something that they can feel confident in. It's that defense that they've been relying on. It's the fact that they were on the road for those 2 months and know what it's going to be like to live out of a hotel where 3 weeks is really nothing. One of those weeks is spring break. They've been having games while doing classes on the road. So having games when you're just there in a hotel, this is going to feel like a vacation almost for them. Obviously, they're going to be working extremely hard. They flew out to Texas today. But now they can start planning. It's one game at a time. It's everything that you would want for a team. One worry I have for Stanford is just the inexperience on the roster in the NCAA tournament. There's just 5 players who have played in an NCAA tournament game, but that's the case around the country because no freshmen last year, none of this year's sophomores got a chance to play in an NCAA tournament game. So much of every team's roster is going to be new to this process. And as Tara will tell you, Stanford got a great test by going up in the Pac-12 tournament where we do have those other top teams in the country. You have teams like UCLA and Arizona that are going to give Stanford tests, that gave Stanford tests. And now as they go into San Antonio, they're feeling confident that they've seen this style of play before. They know what it's like to be in a win-or-go-home situation. And this is a team that's so close, so together, a team that really wants to do it for each other. Tara had a really great quote a few weeks back where she basically said, the teams that go the furthest are the teams that just don't want to stop playing. That's this team. That's why it feels like they're going to have a chance to go really deep in this tournament.
Yeah, Daniel, I really liked your article in the Daily detailing Stanford's #1 seed and just talking a lot about this team's season and everything that it's going to face in the tournament. And I think one of the points you made and one of the point other commentators have made is that Stanford is going to be more used to this bubble environment than anybody else in the country. Because think about it, this team spent 10 weeks on the road. They know what it's like to be living out a hotel already. They know what it's like not to have your usual home base for long stretches of time. And they know what it's like to just go out there and play ball and that to be your life for a few weeks in a way that it's not really supposed to be in college athletics. This is, I think, something we haven't talked about enough, but the way that the college athletics have gone this year, it's become something far more professional than it was ever intended to be. And I think it is just further evidence that got to pay these players. Like they need to be treated as professionals. If you're going to make them do the same obligations as professionals, then you need to pay them as such. But I think Stanford is used to that environment at this point. And I think that exactly what Tara just said, this is a team that loves to play. They don't want to quit playing. And I think even though obviously a 29-year title drought is not something that directly affects the players on this year's roster, I still think that's something that hangs over this program and something that they want to erase. And I'm not sure they've had a great chance to erase it because there's been such dominant teams in women's hoops over the past few years that have kind of made it difficult for Stanford to crack into the elite. Well, this year, that's their chance. And I think that at the very least, Final Four should be the expectation. You got South Carolina as the #1 seed waiting below you. I think the Gamecocks at different times have been considered maybe the best team in the country. That would be a tough Final Four matchup. But I think ultimately this team is going to end up playing on that last night of the season against UConn. And then we're just going to see what happens. And we're going to see if Anna Wilson can do it again defensively against Paige Buckers. And we're going to see if Stanford's depth can really overcome the Utah juggernaut. I think they absolutely can. And I think a lot of it would come down to maybe can a player like Cameron Brink inside really break out at the right time and provide a scoring lift that nobody sees coming.
And I think that's the key point. You mentioned earlier, Stanford, when they play Louisville, may have a chance to play a team with a player better than anyone on their roster. And clearly, if you're looking at any WNBA prospect rankings, Dana Evans is right there near the top. And you have to go a little bit farther to look at find Kiana Williams. Of course, on any given night, Kiana Williams can absolutely be that player. But you look deeper down Stanford's roster, and they have players like Haley Jones and Cameron Brink, who on any given night can show that pedigree. Obviously, they're younger. Haley Jones playing in her first career NCAA tournament, but a former #1 overall recruit. Cameron Brink, a #3 overall recruit, and is already showing so much as a freshman. Can they live up to those expectations on the biggest stage of the year? They might need to in order to beat teams with players like Dana Evans.
ultimately what it comes down to in the tournament when you're a favorite is, can you win on the nights where your shots aren't falling? I think Stanford absolutely can. I think they've proven that they can do that. I think they've proven that overall their defense wins championships. And if you look at that Pac-12 tournament second half against UCLA, shots weren't necessarily falling. It was ugly offensively, but you never felt like UCLA had a chance to get back in the game because of how elite this group is defensively. And that's what's going to carry them at least to the Elite Eight. I don't think any team can touch you when you're a team with this much offensive talent that plays so hard defensively. And then, of course, that is also what allows you to squeak by in these tight games in the later rounds of the tournament, is whether you have that ability to win on those nights where your shots aren't falling. I think if you look at Stanford compared to every team in its bracket, including Louisville, they are much more suited to withstand those off nights that you know are going to happen in this weird environment. We said they're more suited to withstand the environment, and I think that this is Kiana Williams' moment. I mean, you talk about a lot in your article. Interviewed her and got great quotes. I mean, this is her moment to go home and to shine in front of her hometown. I'm sure that as much as it's allowed, she'll have lots of family and friends there. And this is, I think, her senior season, the best team she's played on at Stanford. And I expect that if Stanford does go on to win this thing, she will be the most outstanding player, because down the stretch of the season, she has been Stanford's best player.
No, absolutely. And if Stanford wants to get to that precipice, it's going to be Kiana Williams on the stretch. Tara Vanderveers talked about it the other day, saying that, hey, we're working on trying to find some other options because teams know at the end of games, we are most likely going to look for Kiana Williams because they want to have that versatility. They want to be able to give a last shot to Lexi Holder, Anna Wilson, someone else to put it in at the buzzer. But at the end of the day, it's going to be Kiana Williams. And in her hometown, I don't think anyone's betting against her.
I'm certainly not, and I am pumped to watch this team. They will get going this coming, let's see, what is that? This coming Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific against Utah Valley. And then hopefully they'll be back in action a couple days later to face the winner of Oklahoma State and Wake Forest. By the way, Oklahoma State's a pretty good team. They have an All-American caliber player in the front court in Natasha Mack. So that's not an easy second round game. That might be a chance for Stanford to kind of get its tournament feet underneath it and start to feel confident in their ability to make a run. But Stanford men's basketball will not be participating in the festivities in Indy. They weren't even close. Weren't even invited to the NIT. I was wondering, but when you lose 5 straight games and finish 14-13, not many people are going to be interested in watching you play any more basketball. We still want to talk about this tournament because, this is our favorite time of the year. We love March Madness. I know that filling out brackets is probably the greatest sports joy of my life. And I think there's also a lot of Pac-12 storylines and Stanford adjacent storylines to discuss. So, first of all, Daniel, which Pac-12 team do you think is going to make the deepest run in this year's tournament?
Seeing what Colorado did to Stanford a few times, I have to like their chances. Have a good shot to get pretty far, but it looks like another year where Pac-12 isn't producing top teams, and we're going to be surely talking about that. But what is Colorado able to do? They may have a shot. Oregon, maybe. But beyond that, I think USC with Evan Mobley, who can just take over any game and is going to be probably a top 3 pick, that's another place you can go to get a couple wins for the Pac-12. But other than that, it's going to be another year of putting those Pac-12 teams on the line, trying to support the local teams, and then getting disappointed when your bracket's busted.
Yeah, I'm setting myself up for some disappointment and a busted bracket because I put 2 Pac-12 teams in the Elite Eight. And this is probably just because I've watched a lot of Pac-12 teams, some live, and haven't gotten to watch much basketball otherwise. And so there's some teams that I really like in the Pac-12 that I think were maybe a little bit underseeded. One of those is Colorado. Colorado is the highest seeded Pac-12 team at 5. Maybe it's just because both times they played Stanford, they killed them. But I really like this team. I think McKinley Wright is one of the more underrated players in college hoops, and I think that his ability to fill it up both scoring and also passing and facilitating his offense is a huge part of what makes the Buffs maybe the most dangerous team in the Pac-12, that when they're really clicking, nobody can really play with them. And I think they got a really good draw because I don't see Georgetown as going any farther. I think that their luck has kind of run out after a great Big East tournament. And I think that Florida State's probably a pretty vulnerable 4 seed. So I think Colorado is capable. They also are in the top half of the bracket with Michigan, who's definitely the most vulnerable #1 seed, thanks to injuries and just generally poor play down the stretch. So I think Colorado's got a great chance. I'm also putting USC in the Elite Eight because, again, draw is huge for the Trojans. Evan Mobley is one of the few people in the country who can play with the bigs, like Iowa's Luka Garza. And so I think that's, if USC is able to advance, and I think they've got a great chance. Kansas is dealing with COVID issues, and that's who else is in their pod. So I think this team's going to the Sweet 16. I think even if they face a fully healthy Kansas, that they have just as much firepower. And again, it's a rare chance for Kansas to play against somebody who, another team who has the best player on the floor. And then in the Sweet 16, if that was a matchup against Iowa, as most would predict, I think that Evan Mobley might be positioned to shut down a guy like Luka Garza because of his shot blocking ability. So I think the Pac-12 is going to represent itself fairly well. On the other side of the bracket, Oregon State facing my beloved Tennessee Vols. That game is going to be at least a 20-point margin. So I hope the Oregon State people are listening. I'm not even going to show a little bit of respect. The Beavers are so fraudulent, it's not even funny. I mean, Stanford absolutely should have won that game a few days ago. I don't know if I've ever seen a tournament team that's more mediocre than the Beavers. And I think that, the talent of the SEC talent is gonna expose that on the national level. So I'm looking forward to watching the right team in orange win there. But Daniel, beyond that, who do you got going to the Final Four this year in Indy?
I mean, it's basic, but you have to love what Gonzaga is doing. Just so much talent, well-rounded team, and in a lot of ways, obviously the top overall seed, but show you a lot of similar things to what Stanford women's team is doing. But just an extremely talented team and team that's really hard to pick against. And they're in a bracket, a region where they've basically beat every other team that's important. They beat Iowa, Kansas, and Virginia, the 2, 3, and 4, big time. And just obviously you have USC getting to that Elite Eight matchup, but whoever Gonzaga is going against, they're going to make it to the Final Four pretty cleanly, just based on pure talent alone. And as you mentioned, I do think Michigan may be a little bit vulnerable. And I like Alabama in that East region. I think that's a really exciting play. We saw them go against Stanford. We obviously saw Stanford win that game in what now looks like the surprise of the season and makes no sense. But that Hall and Oates, that ball and Oates style, that pretty good defense to go along with it is going to go a long way come tournament time. And then you're looking at teams like Illinois, Baylor, and you're going chalk because they also have that talent level. I think there's a lot to like both of those teams, especially with Illinois, who haven't been to the tournament since 2013, but absolutely balled out this year and have a lot of talent. So it'll be another great tournament. Really looking forward to it, but it's going to be a lot of surprises too, even though, of course, I'm going with chalk.
Yeah, I'm going with chalk in the Final Four too, just because I think that we've seen this year in almost all sports, there's been a greater separation between the top teams and everybody below them. I know we've seen that in men's basketball in particular, and I think in women's basketball as well, that those top teams have separated themselves this year because maybe it's just a factor of without having as many fans at games, like when you go on the road against an opponent with less talent but who can play with you, that home crowd gives them a lift and they're able to play above their ability. Maybe it's because the top teams just operate with better chemistry and are able to work through the struggles of a COVID season more effectively. Whatever it is, I definitely think that when you look at the Final Four, it's going to be more chalky than usual. I have Gonzaga, Alabama, Baylor, and Illinois as well. I think that's exactly what you just said. So I think that's pretty boring. I think there's going to be a lot of upsets before that, and that's why I wanted to go with that Colorado and USC in the Elite Eight. That would be awesome for the Pac if you could get that representation from the West Coast. Also, San Diego State, another West Coast school to look out for. There's definitely plenty of good basketball. Then on the women's side, we didn't get to talk about our Final Four picks there. I'm also going 3 1 seeds and a 2. Going to go Stanford, South Carolina, UConn, and then 2 seed Texas A&M. In that bottom right region. So I think that we're going to have pretty chalky Final Fours in both. Still not all 4 #1 seeds, but of course, the chalkier it is, the better those Final Four games are going to be.
And that's when you really start salivating. You're getting all of these great games, and it's been kind of a weird season. All of the different we haven't gotten to see those really top teams play each other yet, especially on the women's side. The Pac-12 had such a short lead into the season, and they did a double round robin where it was almost all Pac-12 games. So getting to see top teams on the men's side, on the women's side, play each other in the Final Four, that's what we're all hoping for. Should be some really great play, and it makes you think, hey, you know what? It would be really nice if Stanford men's basketball was giving us some tournament games because they're an exciting team. They have a great style. When are we going to finally get those wins, those just moments in the tournament where you get a little bit of Maples magic?
Yeah, Daniel, give me your women's Final Four real quick.
I have to agree. I like your top four. I haven't filled out the bracket, but when I do, I'm sure it will be Stanford, UConn, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. Texas A&M not getting the 1 seed over NC State was a little bit surprising, but really talented team.
Yeah, I think they're a team that some people think is right up there with UConn and Stanford as the top in the country. So I'm going to go with the experts there. But you were talking about how nice it would be to see Stanford in Indy. I mean, obviously, I agree. Just saw that Larry Kristoyak at Utah got fired after 10 seasons. So people are pulling the trigger in the Pac-12. We've seen that the COVID season has not stopped the coaching carousel. Don't expect to see Jared Haas on that coaching carousel anytime soon. Stanford is content with the work he's doing recruiting, content with the way that he held this team together for most of the season. What we talked about last week, we'll probably have to talk about it again. The way this team has faded at the end of the season, 2 years in a row, really 3 years in a row, is just really concerning for the trajectory of this program, particularly when you consider that Stanford in the last 2 years, we don't know last year definitively because there was no bracket reveal, but basically Stanford's played itself from on the right side of the bubble to the wrong side of the bubble all in the last few games of the season. If you continue to do that, you're not going to inspire much confidence in the future of your program. But speaking of big time futures, Stanford football has a big time pro day coming up on Thursday, the 18th, in which 11 different Cardinal players are going to have a chance to showcase their talent, going to be broadcasted on the NFL network. So big time exposure for Stanford as a program in general, and a big time opportunity for multiple of these players who are somewhere on the fringes of draft boards, some higher like Walker Little and Davis Mills, and some who have slipped over the past couple of years like Paulson Adebo. Daniel, who do you think needs to perform the most on Pro Day?
Well, a few of those names, Paulson Adebo and Walker Little, just need to remind people that they exist because for such a long time, you could basically just pencil them in as first-round picks. Walker Little came in as just an incredibly highly touted recruit. Paulson Adebo absolutely balled out in his, I think it was his redshirt freshman season, and then had some good years after that. But just remind people that you can play some football because incredible talent there, both of them. It'll just be showing it off. It'll be getting the metrics. It'll be putting your name out there. Hey, oh, I remember that guy. I saw him. I know what he can do. Just to get yourself on these boards because for such a long time, you could just put them at the top. And then I think this pro day is going to be extremely important for Davis Mills, who is not getting rated, I think, as you and I would after seeing him this year. Just a very good arm talent, a very smart player, more mobile than you might think, although he has suffered a lot of injuries and still wears that knee brace, but someone who could definitely be an NFL quarterback and is not necessarily getting evaluated as one right now. They're all over the board in terms of where he's being ranked. Some have him going in the second round, some have him going in the fifth. It's very inconsistent, but with a good pro day, Davis Mills could show people that, hey, remember, I was that top overall high school recruit for the quarterbacks. I had a great year. Did I just play 13 games at Stanford? Sure. Is that enough to normally evaluate someone on? No. And David Shaw has talked about that, about his quarterback, but he's also said, hey, this is a guy who can play. He only had this much of an opportunity. And then after starting the year 0-2, one game in which Davis Mills did not even play because of that whole COVID situation, took his team to 4-0. And that's what teams are going to see. That's the trajectory that Davis Mills was on. So now it's just putting it all together on a pro day. And then I think it's important for Connor Weddington, Simi Fehoko, his receivers that he's going to be throwing to. I think both of those are draftable talents, especially Simi Fehoko, who left before getting his degree. I think going to be very important for him to show off all of his talents. and just had a monster end of the season. We know what he can do, but just showing that, putting it on tape for the pros. I think in 11 consecutive drafts, multiple Cardinal have been taken. In the last 7, at least one offensive and at least one defensive have been taken. That is undoubtedly going to continue this year if you just look at Paulson Adebo and Walker Little. But then it's who else is getting it behind them. This pro day is going to be so important for Stanford players.
I really think it's as important a pro day as I can remember for Stanford as a program because so many of these players have a lot at stake individually. First, on Davis Mills, this guy's getting a lot of disrespect. I saw an article about him in The Athletic where he finally got some love, but Davis Mills was daggum elite. In between everything from the first half against Colorado to that one funky stretch of the second half against UCLA, in every other stretch of the 5 games he appeared in, he was marvelous. And I think if you watch how he recovered in that UCLA game and how he played late in the fourth quarter and overtime, man, I've almost never seen a quarterback play that well. And I think that he is not your typical Stanford quarterback. He just has that extra oomph that you never saw from a guy like Kevin Hogan or even from KJ Costello. There's something about him that screams he's going to be a pro starter if he can only stay healthy. I think obviously the biggest thing for him is just going to be how does he measure with his health. You know, when they do all those medical evaluations, do they think that those surgically repaired knees are going to hold up over the course of NFL career? I certainly expect so. I mean, he looked mobile and athletic and as strong as ever this past season. So I think that he has every opportunity to go out there and prove that he is a starter level player. I just think that he's probably almost no matter what going to be drafted under his potential. And so whatever team gets him is going to have the potential to develop him into an elite quarterback. I really believe that. I think that if there is that underseeded gem in this QB class, it's got to be Davis Mills. I definitely think the people who have the most at stake are Adebo and Walker Little, because when you look at those two guys, they kind of stake their entire draft stock on this pro day by opting out of the season. I feel so bad for them because both of them came into this season. You know, most people thought they probably shouldn't return because they were going to be drafted highly last year. They decided, you know what, we want to make something special out of our senior season. We got this great quarterback in Davis Mills. We think that this is our best team in a while. Obviously, I think it's hard to argue with their decision to opt out given everything they had at stake. I mean, they'd come back. They couldn't possibly risk getting injured for this, you know, absolutely dramatically shortened season. And yet, by opting out, they put themselves in this position where the combine and Thursday's pro day are going to be their chance to prove it. We know that Walker Little at his best is an absolutely elite tackle. I think Pro Football Focus still has him about number 40 overall. Maybe still has a chance at going in the first round. It's probably not likely. Whereas at one point, this guy was thought of as a top 10 pick. I think, though, that if he has a really strong pro day and a really strong combine, he's going to remind people that in terms of just pure raw talent and size, he's got as much going for him as any offensive lineman in this draft class. And then for Paulson Adebo, I mean, his strongest tape is from that redshirt freshman season. He struggled a little more in that redshirt sophomore season, but still was an absolute playmaker. And he's got great size and is a good tackler as well. So that is going to really complement his ability to play the ball. I think if he goes out and shows that he still has his form from those first 2 seasons, people are going to remember that this guy is an NFL cornerback as well. It's just that those two have a lot at stake given that this is the only football they will have played this season.
And first football in a long time, too. I think part of the reason that they both opted out is that they were both coming off injuries as well, where Walker Little missed the entire season after the first half of the Northwestern game, and Paulson Adebo missed the last 3. So we haven't seen them play any football. That's why this pro day is going to be so, so important. And then 2 other names just to be on the lookout for. I think both Drew Dahlman and Foster Sorrell should be able to play themselves into the draft at some point. Drew Dahlman is just an incredible leader, someone you can put in front of the media, but someone you can put in front of your team and just talk very well about the team, face of a franchise potentially. That kind of player. Is he have the talent for it? That's where we have to see. But someone you can really trust and why he was such a leader in the locker room. Foster Sorrell obviously has a talent to do a lot. We didn't necessarily ever see it come all together at Stanford, but an incredibly talented person. And then just an interesting note today, I saw on Twitter that KJ Costello said he would be throwing at the San Jose State Pro Day in addition to the Mississippi State Pro Day, which I thought was pretty fun for the former Cardinal as well. So a few names that have a chance to really do a lot on Pro Day. It does look like Malik Antoine will not be participating. wasn't on the press release, which I think is interesting considering. So I definitely want to follow up with whatever he does next, because all year long he's getting questions from the media like, are you going to go into coaching, just because of how talented he is and what a great football mind he has.
Yeah, I think whatever he wants to do, if he wants to have a career in football, that will be available to him. Drew Dahlman, a great point to bring up there, because he was maybe Stanford's best player at times this season and graded out incredibly highly when you look at Pro Football Focus and these other ratings organizations. I'm kind of surprised he's not getting more NFL draft love. I know that's kind of how it is to be a center, but I think that if you want a center who's going to come in and be ready to play at the NFL level, and most of all, who's going to be a great presence in your locker room, Drew Dahlman is your guy. And Dahlman will join Adebo, Little, Fehoko, and Mills at the NFL Combine as well. So plenty more time to support your Cardinal as they prepare for April's NFL Draft. That is it for us this week at Cardinal Dash. Thank you for listening. Go out and follow us on all the social medias, because there's going to be everything's heating up right now. I mean, Pac-12 basketball a little bit more in the spotlight, and we certainly hope that Stanford women's basketball is going to be bringing home the program's third national championship in just a few weeks. So check back next week for our coverage of their first weekend. And thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your week. Go Card.